Hello, dear friends. The human being is designed to live in the countryside, not in concrete blocks, as Desmond Morris wrote in The Naked Ape. This book has been translated into 23 languages. Opinion piece. Heidi Syndrome. Nature Deficit. Love for Mother Earth. The Eagle is Landing. Life of the free human being. Minimum dose of nature. Away from the natural order, the natural world. Let's start. All advanced galactic civilizations live their spiritual development in communion with Mother Nature. The utopian future of humankind will be to live in eco-villages in harmony with nature and animals, and the dystopian future will be to live in large, nightmarish cities full of dangers and criminals, like the ones we have seen in science fiction movies. Many of us long to return to the nature of the sea or the mountains with modern conveniences, and to live with like-minded people, because it's not about going back to the Stone Age or becoming troglodytes or cavemen like Flintstones with their log-mobile. I was an asthmatic child in my childhood, constantly medicated, and no doctor was able to cure my ailment. But all my problems disappeared every time I went to live in a mountain village, and I didn't need to take anything. I suffered from the so-called Heidi Syndrome, because I got sick every time I went to the city. The character. Heidi is one of the most endearing and memorable fictional children's characters on the planet. In the middle of a bucolic setting in the Swiss Alps, the little girl lived with her grandfather, surrounded by pure nature with meadows, crystal clear rivers, and snow-capped mountains, green meadows covered with flowers and rivers with fresh, clear water. I find it very strange that such a beautiful alpine paradise as Switzerland is home to the duckies. Voltaire said that the Swiss were as narrow-minded as their bellies. Heidi has to go to the city with her aunt and uncle, to a totally urban environment from where you can't even see the mountains, where the streets are paved and the tram runs. At that moment, away from her surroundings and forced to live in the hustle and bustle of the city, the girl becomes very ill. Heidi is a children's book from 1880 by the Swiss writer Johanna Spyri, named after the main character of the story, Heidi, a little girl living in the Swiss Alps near the Austrian border. It has brought Spyri international fame and is one of the most widely read books of Swiss literature in the world. Full of nonsense, it highlights humankind's values and love for nature. Heidi is captivated by life in the Alps, where she has direct contact with nature. There she meets Pedro, a boy who herds the goats of the villagers, and who will become her best friend and companion in her adventures. Heidi spends a few years in the mountains, living happily, although far from society, as her grandfather refuses to allow her to go to school. The little girl, however, strikes up a great friendship with her grandmother and Pedro's mother. Life in the forest. This praise of nature is matched by the book Walden, Life in the Woods, an essay published in 1854 by Henry David Thoreau, one of the most famous non-fiction texts. In it, the author recounts the 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days he lived in a self-built cabin near Walden Lake. With this project of living a solitary life in the open air, growing his own food and writing down his experiences, Thoreau intended several things. On one hand, to demonstrate that life in nature is the true life of a free human being yearning for freedom from the slavery of industrial society. On the other hand, that understanding nature's resources, its rules, its rewards, its path that must not be forgotten. In his asceticism, Thoreau longed to transcend his conception of the praise of sloth, reaching spiritual elevation almost impossible to attain by other means. Disorder. Heidi Syndrome exists, and many people suffer from it today. Also known as nature deficit disorder, it defines a series of alterations suffered by children and adults who are away from their natural environment. The writer Richard Lowe coined the term in his book The Last Children of the Forest, year 2005. It is an undiagnosed condition that he defines as the impact on physical and mental health of being away from the natural world. An increasingly important impact, considering that predictions indicate that 70% of the world's population will be living in cities by 2050. I hope that this prediction fails. Called nature deficit disorder, it favors the onset of negative moods and loss of concentration. Empathy for animals leads to empathy for other living things, including human beings. It causes anxiety and stress, ambiophobia, an unhealthy fear of threat of living with people or animals, increased myopia among young children, and vitamin D deficiency with its attendant consequences. Lowe created the term nature deficit disorder to describe the potential negative consequences for individual health and the social fabric when children move indoors and away from physical contact with the natural world. Lowe cites research pointing to attention disorders, obesity, diminished creativity, and depression as problems associated with a nature-deficient childhood. He gathered information of the subject from professionals from many disciplines to make his case, and is commonly credited with helping to inspire an international movement to get children back into nature. Studies. A team of researchers from the University of Exeter found that people living less than a kilometer from the coast are less likely to experience mental health problems such as anxiety and depression than those living more than 50 kilometers away. In 2016, a paper by researchers from the universities of Canterbury, UK, New Zealand, and Michigan, USA, found that living with a view of the blue sea and walking on the beach was beneficial to health. Finland's National Resources Institute sets the minimum dose of nature at 5 hours a month. It seems too little. Geopolitics. The old guard system is collapsing and the old guard wants to regain power. Brian Moynihan, president of Bank of America, told CNN, "We have to be prepared for a sovereign default." Lebanese attack their banks to get their blocked money. The Lebanese pound has lost more than 95% of its value against the dollar, and savers have no access to their money blocked in banks, which have restricted cash withdrawals and transfers. The World Government Summit in Dubai suggests that crisis events are a useful path to globalism. Matthias Desmet's book, Psychology of Totalitarianism, examines the psychosis of mass formations. In quotes, 4 things must be in place if a large-scale mass phenomenon is to emerge. The first is that there must be many socially isolated people who experience a lack of social bonds. The second is that there must be many people experiencing a lack of meaning in life. And the third and fourth conditions are that there has to be a lot of anxiety and a lot of floating psychological discontent. Europe. Poland continues to buy Russian oil. European Union freezes 21.5 billion euros in Russian assets. Gas reserves in the European Union plummet. Business bankruptcies in the European Union rise to a 7-year high. Ukrainian armed forces use ammunition with poisonous substance in Donbass. German petition to stop military aid to Kiev. More than 520,000 people have signed a petition calling on German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to stop arms supplies to Kiev and start peace talks in Ukraine. Spain's Minister for Social Rights calls on the government to reconsider its bellicose stance on the conflict in Ukraine and instead help to find a solution for peace. Ione Belarra denounces the fact that hostilities have become, in quotes, the goose that lays the golden eggs for the arms lobby. Disasters. Massive fire at renewable energy plant in Florida. Nitric acid spill in Arizona caused by deadly rollover leads to widespread highway closure. Biden rejects federal disaster aid for Ohio City hit by toxic train derailment. BlackRock owns the 3 companies whose trains derailed. Jeffrey Epstein's documents with the names of his associates are to be released. China. China and Germany join Russia in demanding an investigation into Biden's connection to the sabotage of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. China doesn't plan to fund the US. Its government has just published a list of 20 countries that have invaded the US since the end of the World War II. China sanctions US companies Lockheed Martin and Raytheon Technologies. The Chinese have refused visits from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. They are also not receiving phone calls from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. United Nations Committee questions China over alleged human rights abuses against Uyghurs and Tibetans. Americas. Carnival revelry returns with a vengeance to the streets of Brazil. Argentina's basic food baskets increased in January above inflation. Dispute over territory intensifies Mapuche conflict in Argentina. A surprising tunic from the time of the Inca Empire has been found in Chile. Ecuador's Cotopaxi volcano emits a cloud of gas and ash 1,000 meters from the crater. Curious. New strong X-class solar flare detected. Radiation ionized the Earth's upper atmosphere, causing a shortwave radio blackout. NASA reveals images of an elongated asteroid. It passed close to Earth and its surface is pitch black. Legendary 4,500-year-old Sumerian temple discovered in Iraq. The real reason Saddam Hussein was killed was because he decided to sell Iraqi oil using the euro instead of the petrodollar. A Yale University professor calls on Japan to introduce compulsory suicide at state expense for the elderly population. Pure Nazism. Satanism is very real, and so are the demons they worship, according to David Icke. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.